Xin chào. And welcome back to Living Vietnam, the expat life unfiltered. I'm Phong from ProCare Hanoi, where we fix phones and laptops and help you fix your daily life in Vietnam, too.
And welcome back to the deep dive.
Today, we're wading into what can be pretty complex waters, renting a home here in Hanoi. We're doing this based on the source material you've shared, those excerpts from Renting a Home in Hanoi, Expat Guide.
Yeah, that guide looks like it's, well, packed with real-world stuff. The good, the bad, and maybe the outright scams, unfortunately.
Right. So our mission today for this deep dive is to pull out the really essential bits, the key knowledge, the warnings, the practical steps, basically help you navigate renting in Hanoi feeling, informed and ready.
Exactly. It's about giving you a shortcut using these sources to understand what's important and how to approach it without getting tripped up. We're looking at your sources to help you.
Okay, let's get into it. Where do the sources suggest starting? Seems like the very basics. What kind of place and what's the budget?
Yeah, that's ground zero, according to the guide. Understanding the types of properties available for expats and what they generally cost.
Seems fundamental, doesn't it? The sources really link the property type directly to the potential price range.
Totally. They break down the common choices. You've got apartments first, studios, for instance. The guide suggests those are running somewhere between 7 to 10 million Vietnamese dong a month.
Okay, 7 to 10 million for a studio. And if you need a bit more room, maybe a separate bedroom?
Then you're looking at a one-bedroom apartment. The source puts those more in the 9 to 13 million VND per month bracket, so you can see that jump just for the extra space.
Right. And what about bigger places, families, or maybe people sharing?
The sources mention those two shared houses or even villas. They say these are often found in specific districts, places like Tây Hồ or maybe Long Bien. Good options if you need more space.
And there's a budget option mentioned too, isn't there?
Yes, the guide talks about finding clean rooms in more local style buildings. These can be quite a bit cheaper, maybe 5 to 6 million VND a month.
But there's a catch, right? The source points out some potential trade-offs.
Definitely. That lower price might mean things like, well, squat toilets, which can be different if you're used to Western style, or maybe no elevator in the building, something to think about if you're not on the ground floor.
So it's not just price, it's also about the amenities you might be giving up. Knowing these options and the rough costs, like the sources outline, seems crucial just for setting realistic expectations from the start.
Absolutely. It helps you filter out listings that are way off base, either too expensive or just not what you need, which, as the guide warns later, can definitely happen.
Okay, so knowing what you're looking for is step one. Step two, according to the sources, is knowing where to look. Let's talk about Hanoi's districts.
Location, location, location is a classic for a reason, and this guide really emphasizes it for Hanoi. Where you live impacts pretty much everything.
Like your commute, lifestyle, social scene.
And definitely the price. The sources highlight a few key districts where expats often end up living. Tây Hồ Westlake seems to be mentioned a lot as like the top spot for long-termers.
Why is that, according to the guide?
Well, it's described as generally quieter, more relaxed than downtown. Lots of international cafes, restaurants, services geared towards expats. It's a whole vibe, a community feel.
But that popularity comes at a cost, I assume.
You got it. The sources clearly state Tây Hồ tends to be more expensive than other areas.
Okay, what other districts get mentioned?
Ba Đình is highlighted. Very central, walkable, near embassies and government buildings. Different feel from Tây Hồ.
Makes sense. And Cầu Giấy?
That's described as having more of a local feel, good if you're connected to the universities there. Another distinct flavor of Hanoi life.
Then there's the famous Old Quarter Ham Kim district.
Right. The source acknowledges the charm, obviously, but it's pretty blunt, says it's noisy and very touristy. Finding a peaceful home base there might be tricky, unless you stumble on a real hidden alleyway gem.
And Long Bien, across the river.
Mentioned mostly for families or those wanting bigger homes, maybe a garden. Quieter, more space, aligns with those house or villa options we talked about earlier.
There was a specific tip in there too, wasn't there? For teachers.
Ah, yes. The pro tip. If you're a teacher, the guide strongly advises living near your school.
Why? Just convenience?
It's more than that. It's about avoiding Hanoi traffic, which the source calls, and I love this phrase, soul eating.
That's slightly. Okay, that paints a picture.
Yeah, a long commute across town in peak hour isn't just lost time. It's apparently really draining. So living close avoids a major daily stressor.
That soul-eating description really drives it home. Location isn't just about the view, it's about your daily reality.
Exactly. These districts attract expats for reasons, but you need to figure out if those reasons and the associated costs or maybe the trade-offs of a cheaper area work for you.
All right. So you've narrowed down the what and the where. Now the sources shift gears to something less fun but super important. Potential problems? Spotting the scams, the red flags?
Yeah, this is the be careful out there section. The guide is pretty upfront about dishonest practices you might run into. Forewarned is forearmed, right?
Definitely. So what are the big red flags they call out?
The absolute number one seems to be the no contract situation. If a landlord says something like, oh, you don't need paper, just trust me.
Big warning sign.
Huge. The sources hammer this home. The contract is your legal safety net. Without it, you're really exposed.
What else? Deposit issues?
Difficulty getting your deposit back when you move out, even if you've left the place spotless. The guide suggests this is a common point of friction.
And fake listings. Seeing one thing online and another in reality.
That's in there too. What's advertised isn't always what you get. You absolutely have to see the place in person.
Okay, and there was something specific about utility bills being inflated.
Yeah, this one's sneaky. The source gives an example. Getting charged maybe 4,000 or 5,000 VND per kilowatt hour for electricity when the standard residential rate is much lower, like around 2,500.
That could add up fast over a month.
Exactly. It's a hidden cost increase. The guide also mentions checking basic practical things too, like does the building actually have an elevator and does it work? Is the hot water reliable? Seems basic, but crucial for daily life.
And that story about the karaoke bar.
Oh, yeah. That was memorable. Checking if there's a super noisy business right below you. The source tells this story about someone whose windows literally shook from the bass on weekends.
Wow. Imagine signing a lease and then finding that out.
Right. So these aren't just vague worries. They're concrete things the sources flag up. Any of them should make you pause, ask more questions, or honestly, maybe just walk away.
It leads nicely into the next section of the guide, which is all about that protection. The rental contract itself. The paper shield, as you called it.
Precisely.
Right.
Because avoiding those problems often comes down to having a solid agreement in place. The guide really stresses what needs to be in that contract.
Reinforcing why no contract is such a deal breaker. You need it in writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So first thing the sources say to check, the language. Is the contract in English? If not, do you have a Vietnamese friend or colleague you trust implicitly who can translate it accurately? Don't sign if you don't understand every word.
Makes sense. What about the money side? Deposit.
Needs to be clearly stated. The guide suggests 1 month's rent is the standard deposit amount. Be cautious if they ask for significantly more.
And the rent itself.
Clearly state the monthly amount and the exact due date. No room for confusion there.
And crucially, linking back to that scam potential, utilities.
Yes. The contract must specify the utility costs and how they're calculated. What's the price per kilowatt for electricity? How is water charged? Get those figures written down.
Prevents nasty surprises later. What about ending the lease?
Check the termination notice period. The sources recommend aiming for 30 days notice for both tenant and landlord. Gives everyone fair warning.
Okay, and there was a really practical tip about photos.
Yeah, this is smart. Before you move anything in, walk through the empty apartment and take photos or video. Document the condition of everything, walls, floors, furniture if it's furnished, appliances like the aircon, fans.
Why? Just for your own records.
It's evidence. If there's already a scratch on the wall or a weird stain, your photos prove it was there before you moved in. Helps prevent disputes about damage when you're trying to get your deposit back.
Ah, clever. Like a condition report you create yourself.
Exactly. And one more simple but vital thing. Get a clear receipt from the landlord for every single payment. Deposit, rent, utilities, paper trail is key.
So all these steps outlined in the guide really do turn that contract into a proper shield for the tenant.
Sets clear expectations, protects your rights. It's fundamental.
Okay, so you're armed with knowledge about types, locations, red flags, contracts. But how do you actually find the places? Let's talk about the hunt itself and the role of rental agents.
Right, the sources dive into this too. Using agents is very common in Hanoi, but the guide gives a heads up. Experiences vary wildly.
How so?
You might find agents who are genuinely helpful, know the market, listen to your needs. But the source also warns about others who are maybe just focused on a quick commission, describes them colorfully as hungry sharks.
Chuckles. Okay. Where do people usually find these agents or listings?
The guide specifically points to Facebook groups, mentions names like Hanoi Massive or Expats in Hanoi Housing as being key places where expats connect for rentals.
So those groups are worth joining if you're looking.
Seems like it. The source also gives some best practice tips for dealing with agents based on common issues.
Like what?
First, clarify the fee situation right at the start. Do not pay an agent fee unless it's been clearly agreed upon beforehand. Sometimes the landlord pays the agent's fee, so it shouldn't cost the tenant anything.
Good to know. What else?
Ask for video tours, especially if you can't view immediately. Helps weed out potentially fake or misleading listings before you waste time traveling there.
And a really important one before any money changes hands.
Meet the landlord. The sources stress this. Make sure you're dealing with the actual owner or their authorized representative before you pay a deposit or the first month's rent.
Verifies legitimacy.
Exactly. And the guide does add that there are good ones, agents who work directly for the landlord and don't charge tenants. Finding one of those is ideal, obviously.
So agent or no agent, what's the takeaway from the source?
It sounds like it depends. An agent could save you time and maybe show you more options, but you have to be vigilant about fees and honesty, like the sources warn. Going solo means more effort, but maybe more direct control. The guide gives you pointers for whichever way you choose.
Okay, to make this love theoretical, the sources included a specific scenario, right? A listener question of the week.
Yeah, they did. It came from Liam and Teo, apparently.
And his situation was?
His landlord told him he needed to move out early before his lease was up because the landlord's cousin wanted the apartment. Liam asked, basically, can they just kick me out like that?
And based on everything the sources say about contracts.
The answer really comes down to what's in that written agreement.
Mm.
Legally speaking, if you have a valid contract with a set term and specific rules for ending it early, the landlord generally can't just break the lease because a relative wants to move in. Unless there's some very unusual clause allowing it, which you probably wouldn't have agreed to.
So the contract should protect him.
In theory, yes, but the source also adds that layer of, real life in Hanoi. Even if the law and the contract are on your side, actually dealing with a landlord who's determined can be stressful and difficult.
So practically, it might not be straightforward.
Right. While you have the legal high ground, the source implies the practical solution might involve negotiation, maybe getting some advice, or sometimes, unfortunately, just deciding it's easier to find a new place to avoid a prolonged fight.
It's a really good example of why having that solid written contract is so vital, though. It gives you leverage.
Absolutely. It's your foundation for pushing back or negotiating. It makes it much harder for a landlord to just arbitrarily change the terms.
Highlights the difference between legal rights and real-world outcomes sometimes, but underscores the importance of having those rights clearly defined first.
Precisely.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive on renting in Hanoi, the sources conveniently provided a quick recap. 5 essential tips for expats.
Yeah, these are great takeaways. Really boil down the key advice. Tip number 1.
Always sign a contract and get it in English or have a trusted translation. Non-negotiable, as we've discussed.
Number 2. Check real prices. Don't just trust the first quote. Use those Facebook groups, ask local friends, get a feel for the actual market rate for what you want where you want it.
3rd, ask about utilities up front. Get the calculation method in writing. The source even suggested maybe asking neighbors what they pay, if possible. That's a good one. Sneaky but smart. 4th tip, avoid paying more than 1 month's rent as a deposit. Seems that's the standard. Anything more is maybe a red flag.
And the 5th tip,
trust your gut. This isn't about paper, it's about intuition. If something feels off, the agent seems shady, the landlord is evasive, the deal feels too good to be true. Listen to that feeling. The source says, if it feels wrong, it probably is.
Those 5 tips really capture the essence of the advice in the source material. A solid checklist for anyone starting their rental journey in Hanoi.
Definitely. Whether you're here for 6 months or 6 years, your home is your peace. Rent smart, ask questions, and don't let a bad landlord ruin your Hanoi experience.
Well said. If you enjoyed this episode, maybe consider buying me a coffee. You can just scan the QR code in the podcast cover art. It really helps keep this series going.
And thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope digging into your source material like this has armed you with the knowledge you need.
It's always interesting to see the practical advice that comes out when you really untack these guides. Next week, we're talking about visa options for 2025 student, tourist, digital nomad.
Oh, that's a big one. What's legal? What's working? What's risky? Lots to cover there.
Definitely.
And of course, if your phone happens to break while you're out apartment hunting, or maybe your laptop dies during a crucial video tour,
go to ProCare Hanoi. Fast, fair, and they're really trusted by the expat community here.
Thanks again for listening, and remember, Live well, eat better, and rent with your eyes open. And maybe think about this. Given all those potential pitfalls we talked about, how does knowing these risks change how you'll approach finding your peace, your home, in a city like Hanoi? Something to mull over.